Good news, if you live in France, you don't have to work your way through the weekend anymore. Kind of, let's get into this. So you may have been hearing a little bit about some of the French labor reform laws that have been taking place, or maybe you haven't, but we're going to talk about one law specifically that has been getting a little bit of buzz. Basically, it says that once you are on the weekend, and your boss hits you up, even if the email says urgent, even if it says you have to reply, you can basically say, go fuck yourself. A little
in
bit
French,
more about...
Not in English. If you say it in English, you have to do it.
It doesn't count, then you have to work. A little bit more about this law. Under the new law, companies with over 50 workers are required to open negotiations with employees to agree on their rights to unplug. Any company that can't reach a deal with its workers is compelled to make after-hours expectations explicit. Basically, from the jump, they have to say, you are required to respond under these under this context. This is the sort of pretense that would be required for you to respond to this email, for you to continue working on the weekends, or just turn off your phone entirely and go to the hills, which is what I would do. And this comes after there's been a lot of work-related stress coming out of France. But really, I think anyone can relate to work-related stress. So former French education minister Benoit Hamon says all the studies show there is far more work-related stress today than there used to be, and that the stress is constant. Employees physically leave the office, but they do not leave their work. They remain attached by a kind of electronic leash, like a dog. So another tidbit before I get your response.
First of all, I'm disappointed that you haven't done the quotes in a French accent.
Okay, because I am not gonna ever do that.
But you should.
What are you doing? That sounds like Italian, but also just like you're mumbling. So just a little tidbit before I get your actual response, Hasan. Something you guys should know is that companies are expected to comply with the email rule on a voluntary basis. So there isn't actually going to be any labor measure to enforce this, but they just hope that you will do it, and potentially you would have a case and you have the legal backing if you really feel like your rights as a worker are being infringed upon or you're being super overworked. You have at least the law in place, and it's a good move that France is taking, and certainly it's not really happening here in the United States. So I think this is a great law. But do you think that companies are going to enforce this, given that it's voluntary?
I think it's more about labor culture in these countries, so it's hard for us here in the U.S. to take a look at it and be like, this sounds weird, or this sounds great, because we don't really know what the impact is going to be like or how hard they're going to be enforcing this. Mm-hmm. I remember a similar law being passed in France like last year, I think. It was about vacation time, or it was possibly about the same concept, but for vacation, when your bosses aren't allowed to hit you up after 5 p.m., or maybe this is the actual law being passed and we're covering the same exact thing. I'm not entirely sure. But look, this is like an American Republican conservative's nightmare, where it's like government infringing on, private industry and really incentivizing people to be lazy, and it's going to hurt the economy. It's not. It's not. If you have a happy labor force, you will be more productive in the long run. Mm-hmm. And currently, in America, especially with very little enforced holiday times, which a lot of European countries have these these preset, like at least 3 months, like these really long holiday periods that they give their employees, or even pregnancy leave for mothers and for fathers. So
maternity leave?
Maternity leave, yeah, pregnancy leave, maternity leave, you know what I mean.
You're pregnant, so leave.
Yeah. Maternity leave for mothers and fathers. So we're definitely trailing far behind, and if you look at Americans, Americans will say, oh, well, we're not trailing behind, we're just really, we're hard workers. Mm-hmm. But in reality, it's hurting the labor force, in my opinion. It's creating this inappropriate sense within corporations that, you have to do this because there's no legislation that prevents us from asking for this sort of stuff. So you have to work on the weekends if we ask you to. And it's good. I'm glad that at least people in France are happy.
So I was reading through the comments. We took this article from Gizmodo, and what someone asked, which I think is a good conversation point, is how if this law wasn't in place already, how would it really affect someone if, it's the end of the workday? and your boss sends you an email, can't you just say go fuck yourself anyway? And someone responded, which I thought was wise, basically saying, yes, you could say go fuck yourself, but there's no guarantee that won't come up at a later, review for another position or for a raise, or someone would say, this person does not respond to work emails on the weekend, but this other person who's also up for the promotion does, and so therefore they're given an unfair advantage, not an unfair advantage, but an advantage over the person that is just respecting the office hours that have been set in place by the company. So I think this is a good law, or at least a good measure to take so that everyone is on an even playing field. Because there are some people that think about it. There are some people that maybe don't have the same obligations at home. Maybe someone, has a family and a bunch of, picking up kids from school, and then someone else who's up for the same job promotion or the same, opportunity has nothing, so they can respond to those emails, and then that makes them seem like they care more about their job, when in reality everyone's allowed to have a life outside of work. So I do think that this does level the playing field.
I mean, you're not going to be able to change the human component, especially when it comes to reviews and especially when it comes to promotions. In the end of the day, it's still never a full-blown meritocracy, no matter what industry you go into. If your manager likes you more, you're probably going to get hired for that new position. You're probably going to get a better salary that you're going to renegotiate. And unfortunately, there's no amount of legislation that can stop you from doing that, because in the end of the day, it's up to the individual's discretion. So, I mean, these sort of laws are great because it's for extreme situations. It's for companies that make you work 80 hours a week, or which I'm assuming not a lot of companies in France do already because it's not a part of the culture. But it's more for instances like you mentioned where people have to go home, and they're setting this expectation ahead of time when they're first signing their contract. To be like, I'm gonna have to go home at 5 p.m. every day, and you can't, and I'm not gonna be able to do work because I have other obligations outside of work. I can pursue hobbies. I can pursue, being a good father. These are important things that lead to having a more fulfilling life, and it's important for happiness.
I think that's a really good point to bring up, that at the very least, some people are gonna say, well, it's on a voluntary basis, so who knows if the companies are gonna respect that. That's absolutely true, and we still have to see, it remains to be seen, that's the expression, it remains to be seen how companies will respond to this. However, I do think that at least setting up a negotiation when someone starts with a company, of just sitting down with your employer and saying, okay, this is my life outside of this job. This is what you need to know about me.
Well, they don't even need to say it. They don't even need to say that. They can just be like, we're working till 5 p.m.
Right, you don't need to say it, but I think that it would, if it were me, I would want to open the door and be like, hey, I have an elderly... No, I would not say that, because I'd be like, you should fire me.
They'd be like, you're fired.
I'd say I have an elderly pit bull, and I need to tend to him at the end of the day. So
fired.
So I must go home. Also fired.
Also fired.
Guys, we want to hear from you.
I'm a lesbian, and I have a really active social lifestyle late at night, so I'm going to have to leave at 5 p.m. It takes a while to put on those
the
hey, outfits.
You know that there are no lesbian bars, so basically I do not have a really active social
you know
life.
why? Because lesbians would go there one time and immediately start dating and never go out again. So it would eliminate that. There was a lesbian bar that turned into a gay bar. I remember.
It would just be a meet and greet.
Yeah, it's just a meet and greet for relationships forever.
Let's start a lesbian bar. Guys, we want to hear from you in the comment section below. What do you think about this new French law? Do you think that companies will implement it successfully or not? Don't forget to subscribe.
Are croissants a good alternative for the bagel?
Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. And Hasan and I will see you next time on Pop Trigger and at our lesbian bar.
At our lesbian bar.